Welcome to ACC Position U, the show where we examine which ACC school has the best tradition at each position. Today, it's the DBs. We have a terrific panel of experts that will help us decide which school will be designated as Defensive Back U. But before we meet them, let's take a look at the criteria that we used in determining our finalists. First, we looked at how successful the players were in college. Second, how high was their NFL draft position. And finally, we looked at their NFL career. Also, since the makeup of the ACC changed over the years, we considered all players from a school's history, whether they played in the ACC at that time or not. And while the players from the last 20 to 25 years are fresher in our minds, we didn't limit our selections to just the recent past. There can certainly be arguments made for several other schools based on that criteria, but we narrowed it down to 4 of our finalists for defensive backs: Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and Virginia Tech. Now let's meet our esteemed panel to debate the merits of each of our finalists. Roddy Jones was a 4-year starting running back at Georgia Tech, is now an analyst on ESPN and the ACC Network. David Teal has covered the ACC for many years and has won the Virginia Sportswriter of the Year award 13 times. And Bryant McFadden is a former Florida State Seminole who went on to win 2 Super Bowls for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to start with Clemson and begin with you, Roddy. Who comes to mind when you think of great Clemson DBs?
So, Katie, I'm going to go with the recent past and start with A.J. Terrell. The play, him intercepting Tua Tagovailoa and taking it back for a touchdown in the national championship game, is emblazoned in my memory. Just a playmaker, a big, long corner that had an excellent career at Clemson. And then he went on to be a first-round pick of my dear Atlanta Falcons. So, yes, I am a little bit biased here, where he had an excellent second season. I think he's got the potential to be an all-pro. I really do. Because of his size, his length, his speed, a guy that runs a 4.3, and his overall playmaking ability. He really fits in with what we're doing here in Atlanta. So I know the story on him at the pro level isn't written, but one of the greatest plays to ever been made in Clemson history is that pick six of Tua. So I'm starting with A.J. Terrell.
I think it's a great choice, Roddy. I do, but I think you could argue recency bias. David, take us back, please. Take us back.
Katie, I'm going to start at the top of Clemson's career interception list with Terry Kennard. He had 17 career picks at Clemson and is the first 2-time consensus All-American in program history. And in 1981, he headlined a defense along with William Perry that led the Tigers to their first national championship. And in 8 NFL seasons, he had multiple interceptions in each of those years. Terry Kennard is the one for me.
Brian, did you grow up watching Terry Kennard by chance?
Well, I was a little baby, but my football intellect made me watch Terry Kennard. And I grew up a Clemson fan, so the year they won that championship was the year I was born. I felt like, we were connected to some degree because that's what brought them their first championship. So, yeah, I was a big-time – Danny Ford was the head coach. I was a big-time Danny Ford guy as well. So for my historians that watching me, I know what I'm talking about when I throw out Danny Ford's name. Right?
I love it. I love it.
I love that Terry Kennard pick by Dave, man. He's a thumper as well, not just a ball hawk and safety, but a thumper. He would knock you in the dirt if you gave him an opportunity to do so. But my player that I'm going with, I was a fan. Oh, man. Coming from Jacksonville, Duval stand up, Jacksonville Rains High School, all the way up to Clemson, South Carolina. B-Dawk. Brian Dawkins is my guy when you talk about defensive back play at Clemson. The shield, the gloves, the biceps, the triceps. Yo, I spent many a nights trying to get my arms to look like Brian Dawkins' arms. I'm still trying right now. I have yet to reach that level, but I'm going to keep trying until I do. Man, Brian Dawkins was an outstanding player. First team All-ACC in 1995. Set the school record with 3 interceptions in 1 quarter. Then when you transition to the NFL, played 16 seasons. Took the Philadelphia secondary to a whole nother level when he was there. He was an intimidator. He was a guy that sparked fear in opposing offensive players that he went against and eventually got into the Hall of Fame. So you talk about defensive back play at Clemson, there's a laundry list of guys we can highlight and talk about. But you got to start with Brian Dawkins.
All right, that wraps up our conversation on Clemson. Next up is Florida State. I have a feeling we're about to enter prime time when ACC Position U continues. Welcome back to ACC Position U and our look at the defensive backs. The next finalist we're going to talk about is Florida State. David, let's start with you. What Seminole DB stands out in your mind?
Katie, my choice is based on one of the best college football games I ever witnessed in person. I was privileged to cover Florida State at Clemson in 1988 when Bobby Bowden called the gutsiest fake punt, I think, in college football history, deep in his own territory, late in the fourth quarter, and they snapped it to up-back Leroy Butler. And the next thing you know, Butler is racing down that left sideline, 78 yards, gets to the 1 yard line. The Seminoles kick a last play field goal and go home a winner. Butler, the following season, first team consensus All-American for Florida State at cornerback, went on to a great career with the Green Bay Packers. He's in the Packers Hall of Fame, four-time Pro Bowler. To me, just because of that moment in Death Valley, it's Leroy Butler.
Excellent. I love that story. I absolutely love it. Bryant, for you, I think you can choose yourself if you would like to. I don't know if that's what you're going to do here.
I would never do that. I would never. Thank you for, just allowing me to have that leeway if I would like.
Yes,
but I would never do such a thing. I don't have a hat on, but if I did, I would tip it in honor of a tribute to the guy I'm going to highlight. He is one of the more iconic individuals, not just in sports, but entertainment. Prime time, Deion Sanders, not arguably the best defensive back, not just in college football, but in the National Football League as well. And guess what? He came from Florida State. So that should tell you about what type of defensive backs come from Florida State. Two-time consensus All-American, college, 3 interceptions returned for touchdowns, 3 punt returns for touchdowns, went to the NFL and just took over the NFL. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I can continue to talk about Deion Sanders until next April. I won't do that because that won't be fair. But you guys know who it is. It's Deion Sanders. Thank you for allowing me to have the privilege to talk about Deion Sanders, because I think all of us probably would want to talk about him. But thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, you stole it from Roddy. So now Roddy's going to have to try to top Prime Time and Neon Deion. Roddy, who you got here?
There's no topping Prime Time. That was my first pick. My second pick was Bryant McFadden, but the producers said that I needed to pick someone else since D-Mac.
Yes.
If I blew him up too much, his head may get too big to fit in the shot.
Fair.
So I went with Jaylen Ramsey, who, according to Wikipedia, was the first true freshman to start at cornerback for Florida State since Deion Sanders. Jaylen Ramsey is a guy that you have to account for on every single play. Did it at Florida State. The big knock on him coming out of Florida State was that he didn't have any interceptions his junior year. Well, you know why? Because nobody threw at Jaylen Ramsey. Big, long attitude. That guy has the mentality that you want out of a cornerback. Is an all-pro, probably the best clever corner in the NFL right now. If you were to design a cornerback in the lab, you're designing Jaylen Ramsey. Now, he played with a guy in Derwin James, another first-round pick, that is straight out of Central Casting for a safety, so he should be mentioned in this as well. But Jaylen Ramsey was my guy, so I was not upset when he fell to me.
And shouldn't Terrell Buckley be mentioned as well?
No question. T-Buck, in 3 years, get this, guys. T-Buck in 3 years. Remember, he didn't start his freshman campaign. He wasn't a full-time starter, but in 3 years, 21 interceptions. So basically 21 interceptions in like 2 years. Terrell Buckley was a big-time playmaker, not to mention when it came to punt returns, man, the fooler from Pascagoula. Go watch that Syracuse game there in the Carrier Dome when he actually fooled the punt team like he fair caught the football and took off for daylight for a touchdown. So T-Buck is a guy. Roddy mentioned Derwin James. What about Samari Rowe? What about Xavier Rhodes? What about Asante Samuel Jr.? What about Chris Hope? What about Clifton Abraham? Corey Sawyer?
You're just showing off now, B-Mac.
Yeah.
You're just showing off now.
I am.
What nickname did you say for T-Buck? The Fooler from Pascagoula.
He's from Pascagoula, Mississippi. And the great Gene Deckerhoff gave him that nickname when he fooled Syracuse punt team because they thought he fair caught the football because he caught it and he just stood there, didn't move.
New favorite nickname ever. Thank you for that knowledge. I appreciate it very much. Excellent job. That's it for the Noles. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the Hurricanes and the Hokies, Devin Hester, Ed Reed, DeAngelo Hall, and more when we continue on ACC Position U. Welcome back to ACC Position U. We have two more schools in our look at defensive backs, Miami and Virginia Tech. Bryant, let's start with you. Who set the standard for Miami defensive backs?
Benny Blaze. He set the standard. Won the Jim Thorpe Award back in 1987. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's the only Jim Thorpe Award winner from Miami, which is huge because we know all about the outstanding defensive backs that have played down there in Coral Gables, but he jump-started everything. A two-time consensus All-American, 19 interceptions at Miami. He was so good on Saturdays, they decided to draft him top 4. He was the 3rd pick to the Detroit Lions, arguably one of the highest drafted defensive backs to ever come from Miami, which is another big-time award because of all the prolific guys that have played in the secondary. Benny Blaze went number 3. At a time when safeties weren't considered to be a big-time player in defenses. Now we know what they mean to defenses because of the passing game. But Benny Blaze went number 3 overall, a big-time player for Detroit. The Lions MVP in 1992. He made the Pro Bowl in 1991. You talk about who jump-started the defensive back play in Miami, it has to be Benny Blaze.
Bryant, you mentioned a prolific list. Roddy, please tell me you are going to mention somebody who's my all-time favorite. I appreciate the Benny Blades pick. I do, Bryant, but there is one answer to this question in my mind.
Katie, he's my all-time favorite, too. I wore the number 20 in part because of what Ed Reed did in the NFL. You're talking about a guy that is one of the defining players of a generation of football players in the NFL. When you say who is the greatest safety to ever play the game, if Ed Reed is not mentioned, then that list is null and void. Ball hawk, center fielder that could go and get it no matter where it was. And when he got the ball in his hand, you did not want to see it if you were an opposing fan or player because he was a threat to take it to the house. You're talking about a guy that was a 5-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, and all-decade team, NFL Hall of Famer. You could go on and on about Ed Reed, what he meant to me, the fact that I loved watching Ed Reed. I would watch those Baltimore defenses just to see what he was doing. Cerebral. Ask Peyton Manning about who the toughest safety was to play against, and he talks about Ed Reed. Again, it's Ed Reed, it's Troy Polamalu for that generation of defenders. Ed Reed is definitely the answer for me, and he's back at Miami, back at the U, helping out as the chief of staff now. So, again, could go on and on. Mr. Cool, it's Ed Reed for me.
In the many conversations I have with defensive players throughout college, and I ask them who their favorite players are, a lot of them will reference guys that are currently in the league. But they always finish and round out with Ed Reed and Ed Reed's mentality. They absolutely love the way that he attacked his business and attacked the game. No doubt one of the greatest to ever do it. David, how about you?
Katie, let's pivot from the greatest safety in NFL history to the greatest kick returner in NFL history, and that would be former Miami defensive back Devin Hester. And down at the U is where he first flashed those skills, not only as a shutdown cornerback, but as an All-American punt returner. And then when he went to the Chicago Bears, they converted him to wide receiver and had him returning kickoffs. His 14 kickoff returns for a touchdown are an NFL record. He took 2 to the house in 1 game. And next year, guys, he becomes eligible for enshrinement in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And if they are ever going to put a return specialist in Canton, I would submit that Devin Hester is the one it should be.
David, I wonder as he's taking it to the house if he's ever like, somebody please just push me out of bounds. I'm tired, please. 2 in 1 game, are you kidding me? All right, let's turn our attention to our 4th finalist, Virginia Tech. Roddy, we'll go back to you. Who comes to mind for Tech DBs?
Well, he doesn't voluntarily come to mind because he lives in my nightmares still to this day, Katie George, and that's Cam Chancellor. I mean, 6'4", 225-pound safety that when I took the field against him when I was at Georgia Tech, I got out there and was like, why is the linebacker lined up so far away from the line of scrimmage? The quarterback goes, oh, no, that's their free safety. You talk about a hard-hitting, rangy guy, and it's Cam Chancellor, really defined, set the tone for that Legion of Boom defense in Seattle that won a Super Bowl. He was a fantastic player at Virginia Tech. And the reason that he dropped as far as he did in the draft is because people weren't really sure that he was going to be able to play as a safety in the NFL. But he gets into a great system out there in Seattle where he's got Earl Thomas to go play center field. He can sort of be the underneath guy, the enforcer, one of the most feared players, not only when he was at Virginia Tech, but also in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks. So Cam Chancellor still lives rent-free right up here, Katie.
And he proved all those doubters wrong as he made that transition to the league, which was awesome to see. David, who comes to your mind?
Roddy, here's a scary thought. Cam Chancellor was a high school quarterback and was recruited as such by Virginia Tech and many other schools before they finally found the wisdom to put him back there at safety. But guys, when you think about Virginia Tech defense, you think about Bud Foster, their iconic coordinator, who for a quarter century was leading that group. And if you ask him who his 2 best cornerbacks were, it was DeAngelo Hall, and then the guy I want to talk about is Brandon Flowers. Flowers is a little bit under the radar, a little underrated, certainly not as flashy as DeAngelo Hall, but he was just a shutdown guy on his side of the field. Played on that 2007 ACC championship team for the Hokies that finished ranked number 9 in the AP poll. Went on to have an excellent NFL career with not only the Kansas City Chiefs, but also the San Diego Chargers. Believe he finished his NFL career with 21 interceptions. I'm going with Brandon Flowers.
All right, David, if Brandon Flowers isn't the flashiest, Bryant, give me the flashiest. Give me the flashiest, please.
Yo, Dave, I appreciate that segue into my guy, D. Hall. Coach Foster dead on. When you talk about outstanding cornerback play at Virginia Tech, DeAngelo Hall has to be one of the best cornerbacks to come through that university. That led to him being the 8th overall selection in the 2004 draft to the Atlanta Falcons. We look at what he did at Virginia Tech when he first got to campus. They knew he was fast, but then you watch and listen to some of the stories regarding DeAngelo Hall and how fast he was. They said at one point in time he ran at 4.18. That's the rumor that's circulating through Blacksboro, that he ran a 4.18 at one particular time there during testing. A big-time playmaker, 2-time second-team All-American, semifinals for the Jim Thorpe Award, and like I said, went to the NFL, didn't miss a beat. Finished his NFL career with 43 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. He's a guy that should be in that Hall of Fame conversation at some point in time based on how well he played at the highest level in the NFL.
Awesome stuff, guys. We've stated our case for the finalists, right? So you guys have to choose and make your picks for defensive back U in the ACC. We'll find out next when we return on ACC Position U. Welcome back to ACC Position U. A quick review of the criteria. We considered college career, NFL draft position, and NFL career. And now, the moment of truth. Who does our panel think has the best defensive back legacy in ACC football? Roddy, get us going. Who's your pick?
All right, so this to me was sort of a 3-horse race. It seems like a 2-horse race between Florida State and Miami, but you throw in Virginia Tech, the guys we mentioned, but we didn't talk about Kendall Fuller, Kyle Fuller, Caleb Farley. That wasn't enough for them to get them ahead of Florida State to me. It starts and ends with the Seminoles when you talk about DBU. We mentioned Deion Sanders, one of the greatest, most iconic players to ever play in college or pro. Jaylen Ramsey, talked about Derwin James, Terrell Buckley going all the way back you can just go name after name after name. And honestly, and I'm not just saying this because he's on here with me, Bryant McFadden as well, a second-round pick, a guy that won 2 Super Bowls. He adds to that legacy as well. So I'm going with Florida State as DBU in the ACC.
Excellent choice. David, are you agreeing or disagreeing with Roddy here? I'm
going to spice it up. I'm not going to make this unanimous because I know where Bryant's going with this. he has no choice. I have to go with Miami and the U. You know, Sean Taylor and Ed Reed and Devin Hester. We haven't even talked about Brandon Merriweather and Antrell Roll. We mentioned Benny Blades earlier. Just those defenses, they intimidated people when they got off the bus. And I just think, to me, when I think about groups that just shut down opposing teams and they won national championships, it's the Hurricanes.
I think that's totally fair. So we've got 1 versus 1. Settle this debate, Bryant, for us. Who you got?
Well, Katie, you know, David made some valid points. And, yeah, Sean Taylor, I played against Sean Taylor a few years when I was in college. You know, I think he was, you know, his trajectory was definitely going to be in Canton. He was an unbelievable performer. Antrell Roll, another guy who I played against in college, played with in the National Football League as well. Big-time playmaker. Let's go back to Ryan McNeil, right? You know, before the guys that we mentioned, Ryan McNeil jump-started that cornerback play in the secondary in Coral Gables. But when my school has the one guy that we all wanted to be like if you played in the secondary, think about this. If you grew up hating Florida State, hating everything Florida State related, but played in the secondary, guess who you wanted to be like? Deion Sanders. If you hated everything that was Florida State related, but you had a favorite team that was playing Florida State, you wanted your team to get players that were like Deion Sanders. So when he is the image, when it comes to elite defensive back play, if that's the guy you would like your team to have players like, it has to be Florida State. And then when we sprinkle in some of the other names that we highlighted, it just adds more fuel to the fire, and that fire is so big. So yes, it is Florida State.
David, valiant effort. I appreciate it. But Florida State, congratulations. You are DBU. Guys, thank you so much for all of your efforts. Great insight. Tune in next time when we will tackle another position on ACC Position U.